Comics Word. I'm Christopher Calloway with Rob Bruce. You know Rob from
I-25.
I-25. You know such people, you've seen him on Comic Book Men.
Yeah.
You are actually a producer.
I'm one of the producers, consulting producer on Comic Book Men. I've been working as a consulting producer since season 2. I finally got a screen credit season 4, 5, now we're into season 6.
Excellent. And you're here at the New Jersey Comic Expo on Saturday, November 19th?
In Raritan, New Jersey. This is literally the closest convention to my house. I think it's even closer than Tom's River, which is really small. But this is a nice medium-sized show. The folks that run this run the Long Beach, California show, which is pretty big, probably in the top 20 in the country. But this is an up-and-coming show, and I'm glad to be here. You know, anytime you can get out on a weekend, it's always a lot of fun to see people and hang out.
Now, how long have you been dealing with toys?
I've been a toy collector earnestly since about 1984. I was going to conventions, Comic-Cons in the 70s. I went to my first convention in 1975, one of the Creation Cons in New York City. So I've been to somewhere between 11 and 1,200 conventions.
Let me ask you, all the stuff you've collected and dealt with and sold, for the 1960s, for that era, what is the hardest thing to find? What is the Holy Grail?
Well, I mean, Holy Grail, there's probably like 5 or 6. Certainly the ideal Batman utility belt complete in the box is really rare. Any of the 2, the JLA set or the Batman play set, also by a deal, those are extremely scarce. Somebody just sent me some images of the Roto Jet Gun, which was a Remco toy produced in 1965 for the TV show Lost in Space, in the box. That's extremely rare. And when you say rare, you're talking $4,500 up to like $15,000 for some of these pieces, maybe 20, 25. Pretty much you can name your price. But I mean, certainly those, I consider those to be holy grails because for me, those are the toys that I like. But I mean, there's so much stuff that's produced that's just hard to put your finger on. And a lot of things are obscure, like Remco did a Land of the Giants ship, which was really a shot of the Mike Mercury supercar, which they also put out with a different color with different labels, and that toy is pretty rare. But nobody remembers Land of the Giants as much as they remember Batman. So at one point that was going for like $1,000. Now you could probably pick it up in the box for $350.
Yeah,
just equally as rare. Or the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea play sets.
Yeah. Well, they just started running the Land of the Giants on MeTV recently. Yeah.
It's an odd show if you've never got to see it. It's basically these folks go into outer space and they come back to Earth, but it's an alternative Earth, and it's the Land of the Giants. They come back as Lilliputians.
One of those great Irwin Allen shows.
Irwin Allen just says Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yeah. And it's funny because those are really, for the 60s, those were big. And then you got the Greenway Productions, Batman, and the Green Hornet was also another big one. And it just, for 60s toys, that's what you want to really buy. Now, me personally, I sort of transcend that whole time period, being a child of the 60s. I'm very fascinated with 80s and 90s toys, and I've been collecting a lot of those at this point as well.
And how are the G.I. Joes holding up now from the 60s? Are they still fairly collectible, or?
12-inch G.I. Joes are flat.
Okay.
Reason being, I'm sorry, I'm at a convention, and every time there's like some cosplayer walking by, I'm drifting a little bit.
There are a lot here today.
There are a lot here. But 12-inch shows are kind of flat. I personally, unless they're mint and boxed and play with them, and buy them. I buy a lot of 3/4-inch Joes, primarily because demographically they're more sought after. That target audience is now, in the 28 to 35-year-old, and they have disposable incomes, and they'll buy multiples, as opposed to your guy my age who's looking for 12-inch Joes, which is, he's got kids in college, like me.
So what's hot tends to shift as that generation gets older, has
there's definitely
income,
a shift.
And
disposable income, I actually have a sliding scale, whereas you look at like somebody who's 28, you know, in their second, third job, not married, you know, male. They're buying toys. If they're collectors, they're collecting Power Rangers. And everybody's Power Rangers, but yeah, that's what's hot. You know, Power Rangers started in '93 and it's still on TV.
Yep.
So it has legs. G.I. Joe, you know, was popular then, and then the cartoon made the 3 3/4 inch popular. But right now, there's not a cycle where the show's on TV, or there's a lot of comic books. I assume they're doing some comic. So that market's actually shrinking. Whereas Star Wars is just exploding because you have a non-stop, you know, cartoon, comics, movies, and then a plethora of modern toys and all sorts of things coming out, which is driving the market for the older stuff, which is hitting record prices. I mean, record prices. 12 backs, you know, produced in 77, 78, are going for thousands of dollars graded. And it's just the way the world goes.
And for the 70s toys, I mean, recently on Comic Man was broadcast one where you had a Amigo figure, Green Arrow.
Amigos, you know, world's greatest superheroes, still are retaining value. There's a lot of scarcity in packaging. So if you've got a specific figure on a Kresge card, Kresge was like Bamberger's or Sears, what used to be in the 70s of 5 and 10. It actually became Kmart. Most people don't know that. But Kresge, SS Kresge was a guy who started this middle market store, and they would license their own brand of Mego, world's greatest superhero. Those cards tend to go for, you know, crazy money. I recently had a Shazam, which in the box goes for like, you know, $250, $300 in a really crisp box. On card, we sold it for, not a great card, we sold it for over $2,500. And it's the same figure, it's just the packaging. And it all boils down to packaging with 70s. And a lot of things, you know, price-wise, it's all packaging. You see, if prices realize $10,000 for something, it's not because of the figure or the scarcity of the figure. It could be a Han Solo that they made millions of, that, you know, is $20, $25, $30 loose. But when you get on a scarce card with a scarce offering or perfect condition, it just raises the value. So a lot of people look at the markets and go, oh wow, I got this figure, it's worth $300, and they're not taking into account that their figure's beat up, you know, living in the garage.
Right.
And that has a lot to do with it. Now with that, there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. So I talk to a lot of people, and you know, they'll come to me and say, oh, well, they're trying to take advantage of me. They only want to give me $25. The figures are only worth $20, so you're actually making out okay. But they never want to believe it, but that's just the market. So the key is, you know, whoever you are and whatever you're doing is to understand market trends, the intrinsic value of things from an aesthetic point of view, you know, because a lot of things are sold almost as commodities, but in reality, you want to hold on to them and, you know, keep them. And I'm a true believer in like collecting. If you're going to sell anything, you know, just monetization for pure, you know, marketing isn't, or making money isn't really the way to go when it comes to collectibles, unless you've got a store and you're doing it full time.
I mean, you really want to collect what you enjoy, because they're not all going to be worth money. Again, like you said, it's condition, it's scarcity, demand, the whole bit.
And I find like really rare toys beat up, which I keep because I can afford to, because I'm not paying a lot of money, and then I'll fill in with, you know, a better upgrade down the road.
Are there any toys that are really hard to find scarce because of what they're made of? Like, for example, Stretch Armstrong.
For sure, Stretch Armstrong. I mean, you know, in the 50s, there was a company called Miller that produced dinosaurs and aliens. Miller aliens are very sought after. And they were actually done with a spun plastic, almost like a waxy plastic, and they're notorious for breaking. But those figures, you know, really nice condition, go $500, $600 a piece. Broken, they're worth $30. I think, you know, toys in general, the Marx figures from the 60s, you know, anything you have, is you can take care of it, you know, Matchboxes, Hot Wheels, early ones, Red Lines. If they're unplayed with, obviously they bring a lot more money than something that's hammered. And value is just like comic books, you know, are graded. Toys should, you know, be taken into account, you know, fair, fine, near mint. I tend to only look for things that are very fine or better, because unless it's extremely rare, they won't retain the value. You And if you're spending, $50 for a piece that can go back in value, I mean, go to $35, because there's no guarantee. That's the other thing. Everybody assumes you're buying a comic book for $1,000, and it's a graded, Deadpool first appearance, New Mutants '98, 9.6, $1,000, $1,200. Sure, maybe one day, and then now it could be worth $800, $700, because everything fluctuates. It's all supply and demand. Scarcity and rarity, and then you have desirability. You can find a really rare item, but how desirable is it?
Right. And the market's really opened up now with the internet and things like
maybe too much. I mean,
maybe too much,
what I see is like not only the internet opening up, and then multiple platforms like eBay, and then you've got Facebook that you can trade stuff on, and Instagram, and you've got Etsy, you've got Amazon, you've got Shopify, which is a new Google site. But it all broadens things out. eBay is the most fascinating thing, because up till eBay's inception in the late 90s, a lot of things were legitimately hard to find. Now, maybe not rare, but legitimately hard to find. So they would, advertise them in a newspaper like Toy Shop Magazine, which was killed literally because of the internet. And, it would go for $500. And then the internet came around, and that same piece was put up, and it progressively gets less and less and less expensive, to the point where I see items nowadays for $40 that used to sell for $200 all the time, because it's a mass.
Yeah,
the market gets crowded. More opportunities. Now, there's a lot of pullback going on right now with eBay. A lot of people depend on it too much. It's like putting too many eggs in one basket. I don't believe in running auctions. I just, when I sell something online, eBay, I usually do a buy it now, best offer.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
That's what I like.
But a lot of things aren't there. Like, a lot of things aren't there.
Right.
So I collect Japanese toys, and there's certain toys that are on eBay, but if I really want to find something interesting, I got to go over to Yahoo Japan. If I go to Yahoo Japan, I got to use a service. It gets really crazy.
It does get frantic. I was on an online bidding on a comic book, and wow, I mean, it went for like $500 over guide, and you could still find it elsewhere in the same condition.
Right.
It just got crazy. It got really frantic at those last few minutes. Yeah.
So who bought that and why? I mean,
if it was for investment, they spend too much.
Right.
Even if it's a rare book, they still spend.
And I think there's a lot of investment money that's come into the market, and I believe that in the long run there will be a downturn. I don't believe we have a bubble situation, but I do believe that the market is very crowded. When you can find, 25, 100, 200 examples of one comic book on eBay, I mean, that tells me that the market's congested.
And these are the cycles that we tend to run through. We saw in the 90s where there was a bubble burst.
I mean, there was a bubble burst originally in the 80s with the black and white independents and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was so exceptional that it spawned other books. Albedo, the second issue was Stan Sakai's Yosagi Yojimbo, the rabbit Shogun Warrior, is in that. Ronin is in that, and that's like one of those books that's really hard to find. I spend years looking for that book in the field. They didn't print a lot, but those two books spawned multiple examples to the point where the market got so congested that it just imploded on itself about 88, 89, and then it went cycled again. End of the 90s, kind of did the same thing. In 2000, we had the same thing. I think we're at the top of the market now. I don't see a major adjustment, but I do see prices fluctuating again, going back to New Mutants '98, perfect example. I'll see it for $375 on one table, $700 on another, graded for $1,000, graded the exact same condition for $800. I mean, those are 200,
big swing.
200-point swings, literally, when you get boiled down to the nuts and bolts.
Wow. Well, Rob, thanks so much for imparting your wisdom and knowledge on us.
Where are we? We're at
New Jersey Comic Expo, and this is the Comics Word for Word of the Nerd.
Word of the Nerd. Everybody knows the word is the nerd.
Well said. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Peace. Watch AMC's Comic Book Men.
Don't miss it. Sunday night after the Walking Dead.
He's not going to be on it.
He's not going to be on it.